What if the most powerful person in the room never raised their voice, not even once? No threats, no grand speeches, no power moves. They just sat there, thinking, and somehow everybody felt it. That quiet pressure, that invisible weight in the air. Like standing next to a live wire you can't see but you can absolutely feel. That's what it's like to be around an INTJ. And here's what makes it so wild. They have no idea they're doing it. They're not plotting. They're not performing. They didn't walk in with a strategy to make you question yourself. They just walked in, and something about the way they exist in a room just does something to people. Not because they insulted you. Not because they tried to assert dominance. They didn't raise their voice, they didn't cross their arms, they didn't do any of the things people usually do when they want you to know they're the most important presence in the room. They just existed. Calmly, quietly, with this composed, unreadable stillness that made your own nervous energy suddenly feel very loud. So what is it? What makes an INTJ so naturally, effortlessly, quietly intimidating? Why do people feel the need to explain themselves around someone who didn't even ask? Why does a single glance from an INTJ feel like a whole interview? That's exactly what we're unpacking today. And by the end of this, you're either going to understand yourself a whole lot better, or you're going to think very differently about that one quiet person in your life who makes you slightly nervous. Let's go. The gaze that diagnoses. The first thing you notice about an INTJ is the eyes. Not because there's anything unusual about them, but because of what they're doing. Most people's eye contact moves. It drifts, it softens, it does the social dance, glancing away at just the right moment, letting warmth fill the expression to ease the other person's comfort. It's a form of courtesy, actually. A way of saying, I'm not a threat. We're just chatting. The INTJ doesn't do that dance. Their gaze lands and stays. And there's a crucial difference between cold and focused that most people never consciously register. Cold is dismissive. What the INTJ has is the opposite of dismissive. It's fully present, fully attentive, processing at full capacity. The problem is that being fully processed feels a lot like being evaluated. An evaluation, even when it's completely neutral, triggers something ancient in us. It makes us want to perform better, explain ourselves, justify our presence. Here's the honest truth. The INTJ probably is running some kind of assessment. Not maliciously. Their mind is wired for pattern recognition, and every interaction is data to be cataloged, cross-referenced, and filed. When you walk away feeling like they saw through you, you're not wrong. They just don't see the need to hide the fact that they're paying attention. Silence as a native language. Most people treat silence like a wound that needs to be patched up immediately. A joke, a comment about the weather, a transition phrase that means nothing but sounds like something. People do this constantly, automatically, without even realizing they've been trained to see silence as a failure state. INTJs sit in silence the way other people sit in a comfortable chair, settled, unbothered, completely at ease. That ease is profoundly, irrationally disarming. Because when someone is comfortable in the discomfort you're drowning in, it sends an involuntary signal to your nervous system. This person is operating from a different level of stability than you are. You're scrambling. They're resting. And somehow, without a word being exchanged, the dynamic of the room has shifted. What the INTJ understands, usually without being able to articulate it, is that silence isn't empty. It's where their best thinking lives. It's where they sort signal from noise and let ideas settle into something worth saying. They're not withholding. They're simply waiting until they have something real to offer. The unsettling part is how that patience reads to everyone else, like absolute, unshakable confidence. The mirror nobody asked for. INTJs hold themselves to a standard that most people never even attempt. They dig deeper, think longer, refuse to hand over work they know isn't their best. That's just who they are. But here's the side effect nobody talks about. When you're around someone operating at that level, your own standards suddenly feel very visible. Not because the INTJ said anything critical, they might not have said a word. It's the potential of their judgment that does the work. You know they can see the gap. You know they've already spotted what's sloppy or half thought through. And even if they never voice it, that awareness creates this quiet tension. Like being in class when the sharpest student finishes the exam early and you've still got half the paper left. They didn't do anything wrong. They just exist at a level that makes average feel average. Words like load-bearing walls. INTJs don't do verbal filler. No, and well, you know, filling the space between thoughts. When they open their mouth, it's because they've already thought it through, and what comes out tends to land with a precision that makes people pay closer attention than they plan to. In a conversational culture saturated with noise, filler phrases, and opinion presented as performance, that kind of deliberateness feels almost alien. It sounds certain. And certainty, especially quiet certainty, is a difficult thing to argue with. What makes this especially interesting is that the INTJ isn't always certain. They have doubts and questions just like everyone else, but they don't perform uncertainty as a social strategy the way many people do. They either know something or they don't, and they communicate the difference cleanly. Your brain hears tightly reasoned, economically delivered thought and classifies it as authority, not because the INTJ claimed any. Just because the absence of doubt has that effect, whether they intended it or not. Already 3 moves ahead. Here's something that unsettles people without them ever being able to put a name to it. The INTJ is almost always seeing further down the road than the current conversation. While most people are reacting to what's in front of them, the INTJ's mind is running scenarios, tracing implications, tracking where this particular thread leads several decisions from now. They do this the way a chess player reads the board. Not just where the pieces are, but what each position makes possible for both sides. The result is that INTJs often say the thing that disrupts the room, the quiet observation that kills the mood, the question nobody wanted asked, the prediction that turns out to be exactly right. And they don't do this to show off. They say it because they genuinely can't see how everyone else hasn't noticed it. When someone consistently arrives at the destination before you've finished packing your bags, it creates a low-grade, persistent anxiety. Not because they threaten you, but because their presence implies that there are things you're missing, and nobody likes that feeling. When social pressure slides right off, think about how much of human social behavior runs on pressure. We laugh because others are laughing. We soften our views when the room pushes back. We adjust our tone when someone seems upset. It's constant, unconscious, and nearly universal. INTJs feel that pressure. They just don't bend to it the way most people do. They've thought their positions through. They've stress-tested their reasoning against their own high standard. So unless you come at them with a genuinely stronger argument, better evidence, a more precise observation, a flaw they hadn't accounted for, they're simply not going to change course because you looked at them funny. And this is where the intimidation crystallizes into something almost physical. Because when social pressure doesn't work on someone, when approval and disapproval both seem to bounce off them like rain off a window, you instinctively register that you're dealing with someone who plays by different rules. And different rules are unsettling. They imply a power you can't leverage, a vulnerability you can't find. Still water, immeasurable depth. Ask an INTJ how they're doing and you'll get a fine answer. Maybe a thoughtful one. What you won't get is a window into the extraordinary interior life running just beneath the surface. Their inner world is vast and layered in ways that almost never make it into casual conversation. There are frameworks they've built from years of private thinking. Opinions they hold on things you'd never think to ask them about. Areas of obsessive, sustained curiosity that most people in their life don't even know exist. All of this stays mostly interior. Not because they're secretive, but because most conversations don't create the conditions where it feels relevant or welcome. So you get the surface, which is composed and quiet, and you sense, correctly, that there is far more underneath. We register depth in other people even when we can't see it. When someone clearly has more going on than they're letting on, we start to feel that we're in over our heads, dealing with something we don't have the full measure of. And that feeling, without any aggression or dominance being expressed at all, is one of the oldest and most honest definitions of awe. No public version. No private version. Here's the piece that sits underneath all of it, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The INTJ doesn't have a work persona and a weekend persona and a family dinner persona. They're the same person in every room, consistent, unperformative, and completely unself-conscious about that consistency. Most people, without ever deciding to shape-shift their way through life, they adjust their language for different audiences, soften or sharpen their edges depending on who's watching, present a slightly different face in every different context. It's not dishonesty exactly, it's social adaptation. But it means that who we are in any given moment is always partially constructed for the environment we're in. The INTJ doesn't construct anything. What they bring to the room is what they actually have. And while this sometimes means social situations are awkward, it also means you always know exactly where you stand with them, which is, paradoxically, its own brand of unsettling. Because real, unmanaged authenticity quietly holds a mirror up to everyone around it. Standing in front of that mirror, being confronted with how much of your own presentation is performance, is the kind of discomfort that has nothing to do with the INTJ doing anything wrong. They're just being real. In a world that's mostly not. The quiet kind of power. So here's what we've actually been talking about this whole time. Not intimidation as a tactic. The INTJ has no tactic. Not power as a performance. They're not performing anything. What we've been talking about is the effect of a person who is deeply, fully, consistently themselves in a world that has quietly agreed that no one is supposed to be. We live in an era of curated selves and managed impressions. Everyone has a personal brand, a public narrative, a way they've learned to package themselves for consumption. And into that environment walks the INTJ, who missed the memo, couldn't be bothered with the memo, or read the memo and dismissed it as inefficient, and simply exists with a completeness that makes everyone else aware, suddenly and uncomfortably, of all the ways they're still editing themselves. That awareness is the intimidation. Not the INTJ's doing, your own self-recognition, reflected in the mirror of someone who needs nothing from you and performs nothing for you, and is somehow completely okay. INTJs don't intimidate through volume or arrogance or force. It's something far quieter, a self-contained gravity that comes from needing no approval, faking no emotion, and never once apologizing for their own boundaries. If you're an INTJ watching this, keep being that. The world doesn't need more performance. It needs more people who are simply, fully real. And if you've been quietly unnerved by an INTJ in your life, now you know. It was never about you. It was always about them being exactly who they are. And somehow, that's the rarest and most formidable thing there is.